Good day, everyone. My name is Paul de la Cruz, and together with Omari Chambers, who worked on this project, we will be presenting our historical research on the Six-Day War. Our presentation focuses on why many historians consider the Six-Day War to be a pivotal turning point in Israel's history. We will examine the background of the conflict, what happened during the war, and why its effects continue to influence the Middle East today.
Here is an outline of our presentation. We will begin with a historical background, followed by our research question and thesis. Then we'll discuss the causes of the war, the major events, territorial changes, and the immediate results. Finally, we'll explain why the Six-Day War was a pivotal event, discuss its long-term impact, and end with our conclusion and works cited. So let's begin with the historical background.
Historical background. Before discussing the Six-Day War, it's important to understand the situation in the Middle East. Israel became an independent country in 1948, but with peace, its neighboring Arab countries was never fully achieved. Disagreements over borders, Palestinian refugees, and Israel's recognition kept tensions high for nearly 20 years. During the 1950s and 1960s, the border clashes and the military buildups became very frequent. In May 1967, Egypt moved troops into the Sinai Peninsula, requested the withdrawal of United Nations peacekeeping forces, and closed the Straits of Tiran to Israel shipping. Israel viewed these actions as a direct threat to its security. As tensions continued to rise, Israel launched a preemptive strike on June 5, 1967, which began the Six-Day War. Why did the Six-Day War, and when did it become a pivotal event? More specifically, I wanted to find out why historians consider the Six-Day War to be one of the most important events in Israel's history. Instead of simply describing what happened, I wanted to understand why the Six-Day conflict had such a lasting impact. After researching both primary and second sources, I found that the Six-Day War was a pivotal event in Israel's history because it expanded Israel's territory. It also changed the balance of power in the Middle East and created political and territorial conflicts that continue to affect the region today. This is the main argument that I will be using to support throughout the rest of the presentation. The cause of the Six-Day War. Before the war began, tensions between Israel and its neighboring Arab countries had been growing for many years. Since Israel became independent in 1948, disagreements over borders, security, and Palestinian refugees remained unresolved. During the 1950s and 1960s, clashes along the borders became more common. At the same time, Egypt strengthened its military presence in the Sinai Peninsula, while Syria and Jordan increased their cooperation with Egypt. The Cold War also played a major role because the Soviet Union supported several Arab states, while the United States became a very close ally of Israel. Together, these long-term tensions created an environment where even a small event could trigger a larger conflict. The immediate triggers of the Six-Day War. Although tensions had been building for years, several events in May 1967 made war much more likely. First, Egypt moved thousands of troops into the Sinai Peninsula near Israel's border. But shortly afterward, Egypt had requested that the United Nations Emergency Force withdraw from the area. This removed the peacekeeping which buffered between both sides. Another major event was Egypt's decision to close the Straits of Tiran, which proceeded to stop Israel's ships from entering the strait. This waterway was Israel's only access to the Red Sea, and it was very essential for trading and oil imports. Israel had previously declared that closing the strait would be considered an act of war. Around the same time, Egypt signed defense agreements with Jordan and Iraq, while Syria continued to coordinate closely with Egypt. Israel feared that several neighboring countries could launch a coordinated attack. Facing what it believed to be an immediate threat to its country's security, Israel decided to launch a preemptive strike on June 5, 1967. The major events from June 5 to June 6, 1967. The Six-Day War officially began on the morning of June 5, 1967, when Israel launched Operation Focus, a surprise air attack against Egypt. Israel aircraft bases destroyed most of Egypt's air force, while many planes were still on the ground. The reason why these events matter is because Israel feared an attack that might have happened from their neighboring countries. So they, instead of waiting to be attacked first, they decided to go to attacking first, which caused them to send a surprise air attack, and which destroyed most of Egypt's bases and force. With Egypt's air force largely eliminated, Israel quickly gained control of the skies. By destroying Egypt's air force, Israel gained more superiority over the skies, which prevented Egypt from launching any air attacks that could damage their country and slow down their way of attacking. This air superiority gave Israel ground forces a major advantage as they advanced into the Sinai Peninsula, because without significant air resistance, Israeli troops were able to move quickly and defeat Egyptian forces in several key battles. By the end of the second day, Israel had gained significant momentum. These early successes shaped the rest of the war and allowed Israel to expand its operations on the front. After gaining control of the skies and advancing to the Sinai Peninsula, Israel turned its attention to other fronts. The fighting then spread to Jerusalem and also to the West Bank and the Golan Heights. After Israel secured air superiority and advanced through the Sinai Peninsula, the fighting spread to other fronts. On June 7th, Israeli forces captured East Jerusalem, including the Old City and the Western Wall. They also gained control of the West Bank from Jordan. These victories were very significant because these areas held strong military bases and forces. They had strong political backing and very religious importance. The conflict then shifted north towards Syria. On June 9th and 10th, Israeli forces launched an assault on the Golan Heights. But because of the difficult terrain and strong Syrian defenses, Israel captured the strategic plateau. On June 10, both sides accepted a United Nations sponsored, which said ceasefire, bringing the 6-day war to an end.
By the end of just 6 days, Israel controlled several territories that had previously belonged to Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The next slide shows exactly how Israel's borders changed after the war.
By the end of the 6-day war, Israel controlled much more territory than it had before the conflict. As shown on these maps, Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. His territorial gains greatly increased Israel's strategic depth and changed the military balance in the Middle East. However, they also created new political challenges because many of these territories became the subject of future disputes and peace negotiations. The map clearly illustrates why the 6-day war is considered such a turning point in Israel's history. Because in only 6 days, Israel's borders and strategic position changed dramatically.
The territorial changes shown on these maps had immediate military and political consequences. Next, we explain the major results of the war. The Six-Day War ended after only 6 days, but its effects were immediate and far-reaching. Israel gained control of the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. These territorial gains significantly strengthened Israel's strategic position. At the same time, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria suffered heavy military losses in personnel and equipment. The war also displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, creating humanitarian and political challenges that continue to influence the region today. Because of its rapid military victory, Israel emerged as the dominant military power in the Middle East. The conflict also attracted worldwide attention and prompted the United Nations and many governments to begin discussing possible paths towards peace. These immediate results changed the balance of power in the Middle East. Next, I'll explain why these changes made the Six-Day War pivotal in Israel's history. The first reason the Six-Day War was a pivotal event is that it dramatically expanded Israel's territory. Before the war, Israel's borders were much smaller and more vulnerable. But by the end of the conflict, Israel controlled the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. These territories provided greater strategic depth and placed natural barriers between Israel and neighboring countries. For example, the Golan Heights overlooks northern Israel, while the Sinai Peninsula created a larger buffer between Israel and Egypt. However, these territorial gains also brought new political responsibilities and disputes. Many of the captured areas became central issues in future peace negotiations that continue to be debated today. Why the Six-Day War was a pivotal event. The second reason the Six-Day War was a pivotal event is that it established Israel as the dominant military power in the Middle East. On the first day of the war, Israel launched Operation Focus, destroying most of Egypt's air force before it could respond. This gave Israel complete control of the skies and allowed its ground forces to advance rapidly. Within only 6 days, Israel defeated the combined forces of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The speed of this victory surprised military leaders around the world and demonstrated the effectiveness of Israel's planning, intelligence, and coordination. However, the importance of this victory was not just that Israel won the war, it also changed how other countries viewed Israel's military capabilities. Before the Six-Day War, many neighboring countries believed they could challenge Israel militarily. After the war, Israel was recognized as the strongest military power in the region. This changed the balance of power and influenced how other countries approach future conflicts and security decisions. After the war, neighboring countries viewed Israel as the strongest military force in the region. This new military reputation also influenced diplomacy because governments had to consider Israel's strength during negotiations and future peace efforts. Overall, the Six-Day War changed military strategies, diplomatic relations, and future conflicts throughout the Middle East. The third reason the Six-Day War was a pivotal event is that it created political and territorial issues that continue to affect the Middle East today. After the war, Israel retained control of several captured territories, including the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The future of these areas has remained a major source of disagreement for decades because different groups have competing claims over the land. As a result, these territories became central issues in many future peace negotiations. In response to the conflict, the United Nations adopted Resolution 242 in November 1967. The resolution called for Israeli withdrawal from territories occupied during the war and emphasized every state's right to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries. The goal of the resolution was to provide a framework for reducing tensions and encouraging peace after the war. Although Resolution 242 became the foundation for many later peace negotiations, disagreements over how it should be interpreted have continued. Different countries and leaders have interpreted parts of the resolution differently, making it difficult to reach a lasting agreement. Because of these disagreements, many of the political and territorial issues that began after the Six-Day War remain unresolved today. This is why the Six-Day War was more than just a short military victory. Its consequences continued long after the fighting ended. The war influenced international relations, peace efforts, and territorial disputes that still affect the Middle East today. Because of these lasting political consequences, the Six-Day War remained one of the most influential events in modern Middle Eastern history. This also completes the third part of my thesis by showing that the war created political and territorial conflicts that continue to affect the region today. Next, I'll explain some of the long-term impacts that grew out of these unresolved issues. Although the Six-Day War ended in only 6 days, its effects continued for decades. One lasting impact was the ongoing disagreement over territories such as the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. These areas became central issues in negotiations between Israel and its neighbors. as well as between Israel and the Palestinians. In November 1967, the United Nations adopted Resolution 242. This resolution introduced the idea of land for peace, encouraging Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories in exchange for peace and recognition. It became the basis for many future diplomatic efforts. However, peace was not achieved immediately. The War of Attrition followed soon after. And in 1973, Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War. Even today, many political and territorial disputes in the Middle East can be traced back to the outcomes of the Six-Day War. Looking back, the immediate and long-term consequences helps explain why historians consider the Six-Day War one of the most significant events in Israel's history. I'll conclude by summarizing the main points of our presentation. To conclude, the Six-Day War was much more than a brief military conflict. It reshaped Israel's borders, established Israel as the strongest military power in the region, and created political and territorial issues that continue to affect the Middle East today. Throughout this presentation, we examine the causes of the war, the major events during the 6 days, its immediate results, and its long-term consequences. Although historians may debate some of its outcomes, most agree that the war marked a turning point in Israel's history and in the history of the modern Middle East. These are the sources we use for our research. We use both primary and secondary sources, including the United Nations, the U.S. Department of State, the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, scholarly journal articles, and books. This slide continues the list of sources we use for our research. Thank you again for listening.